was a grey and silent morning when we gathered to say goodbye to my Aunt Margaret. She had lived a quiet life in the countryside, never married, never had children. At least, that's what we always believed. The small church was filled with the scent of lilies and whispers of old hymns. People spoke softly about her kindness, her passion for gardening, and her habit of writing in her journal every evening before bed. After the burial, while sorting through her belongings at the old farmhouse, I found her Bible resting neatly on the nightstand. It was worn from years of use, its edges soft and its pages filled with notes and underlined verses. As I flipped through, a yellowed photograph slipped out and fell to the floor. I picked it up and examined it closely. It showed a young woman, my aunt, though much younger, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. Her eyes, though captured in black and white, seemed full of emotion. On the back of the photo, in her handwriting, were 5 haunting words. "Forgive me, I had no choice." I stood there, stunned. What could this mean? Why had she kept this hidden? That single image, paired with those mysterious words, stirred something deep inside me. It was as if she had left behind one final puzzle, one that demanded to be solved, and in that quiet moment, surrounded by memories and shadows of a life I thought I understood, I knew this was only the beginning. The photograph and its cryptic message lingered in my mind for days. I couldn't shake the feeling that my aunt had left behind more than just memories. She had left a hidden truth buried beneath the surface of her quiet life. So I returned to her farmhouse alone, determined to uncover whatever it was she hadn't told us. Her bedroom, simple and untouched since her passing, held an eerie stillness. As I carefully opened drawers and checked closets, something urged me to look beneath her bed. There, tucked away under a layer of dust, was a small wooden box, secured with a rusted latch. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside were neatly folded letters, their edges frayed by time. Each envelope was addressed in delicate handwriting to a man named Daniel Whitaker, a name completely unfamiliar to me. The dates stretched from 1963 to 1965. My heart raced as I opened the first one. The letters spoke of love, longing, and heartbreak. My aunt had once been passionately in love with Daniel, a man who, according to her words, saw the real me when no one else did. They dreamed of running away together, of starting fresh. But the tone of the letters slowly shifted. Words like shame, consequences, and "I had to protect the baby" appeared more frequently. Then came the final blow. A letter dated September 1965. In it she wrote about giving birth to a daughter, their daughter, and how she had been pressured to give the child up for adoption. "I hope someday she'll understand," she wrote. "I pray she'll forgive me." Tears welled in my eyes. My aunt, whom I had always seen as reserved and independent, had lived with the pain of separation and silence her entire life. None of us had known. She had carried this secret alone, locking away not only her past, but an entire branch of our family tree. As I held those letters close, I knew I couldn't let this story end in silence. Somewhere out there, a woman existed who had no idea who her real mother was, or the love she was once wrapped in. And now I had the first thread to follow. With the name Daniel Whitaker and a few old addresses written on the envelopes, I began my search. Most of the return addresses were from a small village called Elmridge, nearly 2 hours away from my aunt's farmhouse. It was a quiet town, the kind that doesn't change much over the decades, a place where secrets could easily remain buried. I arrived on a rainy afternoon. The village was surrounded by rolling hills and fields dotted with stone fences. With the letters in hand, I headed to the local historical society, hoping someone might remember Daniel or my aunt. At first, no one did. Then, an elderly woman named Mrs. Roseman, the long-time caretaker of the town's archives, paused when she saw the photo I showed her. "Margaret," she said softly. "She used to live here, briefly, Back in the 60s, she came here pregnant and alone. People talked, but she kept to herself. Mrs. Roseman invited me into her modest home, where we talked over tea. She told me that my aunt had worked at a small inn in the village and that Daniel had been a schoolteacher there. According to local gossip, their relationship had caused quite a stir. Daniel was already engaged to someone else at the time. The scandal grew, and my aunt, facing judgment and isolation, left town suddenly. Few ever heard from her again. But one detail stood out. She had the baby, Mrs. Roseman recalled. I remember seeing her with a newborn, just once, outside the church. Then, a week later, she was gone. I asked if there were any adoption records or names. Mrs. Roseman didn't know, but suggested checking the nearby church's registry. If the child was baptized here, she said, there may be a name. The next morning I visited the old church. The priest, Father Thomas, was patient and kind, letting me comb through baptismal logs from 1965. After hours of searching, I found it. Emily Grace, baptized in October 1965. The mother, Margaret. The father, unnamed. A note beside the entry simply read, placed in care with the Hendersons. The Hendersons. I left the church with a racing heart and a trembling hand. I had a name, a family, and a path forward. My aunt hadn't abandoned her child without care. She had made sure she went to a home. Now it was my turn to uncover what happened next. With the name Emily Grace Henderson, I dug into public records, hoping for a lead. After days of searching, I found her. Emily Grace, now 58, living in a quiet suburb about 3 hours away. She worked as a librarian, lived alone, and had no children. Her photo stared back at me from the library's website. The resemblance was undeniable. Her eyes mirrored my aunt's. My heart ached with a mixture of excitement and sorrow. I didn't want to overwhelm her, so I began gently. I visited her library, pretending to be a researcher, looking into local history. She was warm, soft-spoken, and helpful. We spoke about books, weather, and small things, but as I listened to her voice, I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was speaking to someone who should have been part of my life all along. A few days later I returned, with the photo, the letters, and trembling hands. I'm sorry if this sounds strange, I said, pulling her aside, but I believe I know something about your past, about your birth mother. She looked at me, stunned, silent. I told her everything, about Aunt Margaret, the letters, the adoption, the church records. I showed her the photograph. Her eyes welled up. She took the photo with shaking fingers, staring at it as though trying to memorize every detail. She's my mother? She whispered. I nodded. Yes. She never told anyone, not even us. We sat together in a quiet corner of the library for what felt like hours. She told me her adoptive parents were kind and loving, but they had always been vague about her birth. I used to wonder, she said. Sometimes I'd imagine what my real mother looked like. I never thought I'd get an answer. We laughed softly, cried openly, and shared stories of two very different lives that somehow still connected. She wanted to know everything about Margaret, her voice, her favorite foods, the way she smiled when telling stories. By the end of that day, we were no longer strangers, we were family, joined not just by blood, but by the healing power of truth. A few weeks later, Emily and I drove together to the countryside, to the place where Aunt Margaret had lived and where she now rested. It was a cool, golden afternoon. The leaves rustled gently as we walked through the quiet cemetery, carrying a small bouquet of white lilies, Margaret's favorite. When we reached her grave, Emily stood silently for a long moment. Then she knelt and placed the flowers carefully on the stone. I forgive you, she whispered. I wish I had known you. I wish you could have known me. There were tears, yes, but they weren't bitter. They were soft, cleansing. A lifetime of unanswered questions had finally found a voice. The silence Margaret had carried in her heart for decades was now broken, replaced with the warmth of connection and the grace of forgiveness. We spent the rest of the day at the farmhouse. I showed Emily the garden Margaret had tended every spring, the journals she had written in each night, and the old records she had kept in perfect order. Emily smiled through tears as she touched the spines of books that once sat by her mother's bedside. "I always felt like something was missing," she said. "Now I understand why." Before we parted that evening, Emily looked at me and said, "Your aunt was brave. What she did couldn't have been easy, but she loved deeply, even if she couldn't say it out loud." That night, I wrote in my own journal for the first time in years. I wrote about secrets and silence, about the pain of the past and the healing power of truth. Margaret's story could have ended in shadows, but instead it became a bridge. It brought two strangers together and turned them into family. My aunt may have taken a secret to the grave, but in doing so she also planted the seeds of reconciliation. And now that secret had bloomed into something beautiful, something eternal. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear the next chapter or explore more family mysteries and emotional journeys, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more powerful stories that touch the heart. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. We've got many more secrets, surprises, and unforgettable moments coming your way. Stay connected, stay curious, and be part of a growing community that believes every family has a story worth telling. Thank you for watching.